Hi, my name's Heather Hendry. I am the curator of the Awfully Hilarious series of anthologies. I went to school in Boulder at Naropa University, and I'm now based in Whistler, British Columbia. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you about a great passion of mine: books, writing, and reading. If I were to give you a really brief synopsis of the Awfully Hilarious series, well, what they all have in common is that they share a common theme of painful or embarrassing moments that, with time and community, have become either quite poignant or hilarious. And what inspired this series was that, hilariously, I went on a terrible date. I called a friend in tears afterwards, and she too had just returned from a terrible date, and she said, "Heather, we could write a book." Bing, bang, boom, we did. Initially, the plan was that she and I and another friend would come together and we would write out our terrible date stories. We would staple them together and we'd deliver them to little free libraries around the country to just let folks out there know, if you're having dating disasters, if you're feeling disillusioned and alone, you're not alone. We're there too. And we were going to sign off the Tinderellas. That said, another friend of mine had just published a book and said, "Hey, I think I can help you turn this into book form." So we did, and once it released, we realized that people wanted to read these hilarious dating stories of ours. So thank you for being one of the folks showing interest. And how we went about collecting the stories in the first place was just, we knew of other friends who'd had tough dating experiences, and we just sort of opened the opportunity. Anyone who wants to share a story with us, please do. And then we realized, oh, wow, this is really a way to get a message out there. So the next book after that, the first was called Awfully Hilarious: Stories We Never Tell, the dating, disasters, disillusionment, and a lot of bodily functioning stories that you really want to read. You may have experienced yourself. And then after that, we realized, okay, let's do another one on a really stigmatized subject. Let's talk about periods. Let's talk about menstruation. So with that came Awfully Hilarious period pieces. And to gather the stories for that one, we actually put out a call for submissions. We were inundated with a number of amazing stories. And then we went through an editorial curation process to try and choose those stories that were submitted that gave us the greatest breadth of personal experience that we could share. We're now working on the third, coming out early in 2026. This one will be called Awfully Hilarious Pillow Talk. Wait for it. These are going to be the suppressed stories around sex, sexuality, intimacy, pleasure, and desire. So really looking forward to that one. We had a lot of really amazing writers submit really amazing stories. As far as what order we put the stories in the book, I'm a therapist, trained, of course, at Naropa University in Boulder. And so one of the things we try to do is we try to titrate the experience for the readers a little bit. And by that, I mean, we might bring a really poignant or very painful story and then follow it up with something quite funny to give the reader a chance to breathe. Helps our systems really process that differently. Regarding the order of the stories in the period book, though, that was very different. For that one, we wanted to run through the reproductive lifespan for folks born with a uterus. So, for example, it begins with the story from an 11-year-old girl called "I Want My Period, God Damn It." And this is, on the verge of her first menses. And then we move through the fertility or infertility journey for folks, or birth control experiences. And then we move on towards perimenopause and menopause. I've been asked, do I have a particular favorite story? I love them all so much for different reasons, and it's really the combination of them that I love. But there's one that really stands out for me in Awfully Hilarious period pieces, and that's right at the end. It's called In a Flash by Catherine Matthews, and it's her hilarious description of her experience with hot flashes. I mean, it goes from trying to wedge herself sideways into a standing freezer to a full graph explaining what's likely to trigger a hot flash. You're really going to want to take a look at that. Harrison Ford is one of the likely triggers. A couple books that I've read recently that I've really loved. I'm loving everything I can get my hands on from Frederick Bachman. I'm just really into his work. I can't put down his Beartown series right now, which is hilarious because despite being Canadian, I'm not necessarily a huge hockey fan, but the way he writes about the human condition, every couple paragraphs, there's a line that I want to copy down and quote. So I'm really, really loving that. I just could go on and on and on about all the books that I love. I loved hearing Gary Zukav's author talk at the Boulder Bookstore. That really spoke to me. And what I'd also like you to know about our books, if I might share, is just that they're stories from emerging authors. So just remembering that as you're reading is that most of these folks are writing something publicly for the very first time. Most of them have never shared these stories. And all of them, when I spoke to them, spoke about the fact that they're doing this in the hopes that it will help somebody else. So that really is our hope with this project, is that these stories resonate and land in the hands of somebody for whom it's helpful. There are going to be a lot more coming. We're going to tackle all the taboo topics, so stay tuned. And if you're a writer and want to submit your story, we'd love to see your story. Join our community at Awfully Hilarious on Instagram and Facebook. Follow along on our newsletter. You can find that on awfullyhilarious.com. And I will just pause to offer a short reading from our book. This is the story that started it all, and it's called Parachute Boy. So let me just grab that here. Spoiler alert, the alternate titles I did consider for this piece included Unhinged, and that red bag is kind of a red flag. So I hadn't been on a date in a long time when I met Parachute Boy, and I'm pretty sure it was my first IRL, in real life, time meeting a man from the dating app called Hinge. Let's just say my experience led to my nearly coming unhinged. I pull my little black Honda Fit off the highway and into a parking lot. I'm wearing something pretty cute, actually, because I dressed for the drink we were planning to have. About an hour before drink time, Parachute Boy texted to say, "Want to meet at the Chief instead?" The Squamish Chief, and I imagine many of you listening, if you've visited Squamish, British Columbia, may have heard of it, is a stunning granite monolith, one of North America's largest and sacred to the Squamish Nation. This mountain now draws outdoor enthusiasts from around the world to enjoy the short summer season, living in their vans, walking slack lines in their yoga pants, and eating leftovers. Not that unlike the Naropa campus, if you visited that in Boulder. Today, the site draws adventure seekers of all ilk, those who would climb, the hikers, climbers, mountaineers, and highliners who literally walk tightropes from peak to peak, and those who would jump off, these being the paragliders and the base jumpers. They come soaring in like flies to honey the second the winter rains stop. Moments after I park, a huge rusted-out truck rolls in and a shortish man leaps out. I know it's the person I'm here to meet because he's got the same man bun as in his pictures, and he's walking towards me. With my curly red hair, I tend to stand out in a crowd, which has the at times convenient side benefit of making it easy for my online dates to find me. Sometimes I wish they wouldn't. I begin to stroll towards him, smiling. I notice his nice blue eyes and his large red backpack. We begin to hike the trail together, and I learn quickly that he's a logger. I'm a wilderness therapist and environmental activist turned on in the 90s by the logging blockades in defense of the old-growth forests of Clayoquot Sound. He's recently returned from cutting old growth, right around that same area. It's hard to say why I'm even on this date in the first place, but if I'm honest, it's because he asked me out, and nobody's done that in a while. I'm also trying to move on from a lovely man I've been stuck on for the past year, and you know how the saying goes. The best way to get over one man? To get under another. What's much harder to determine than why I went on the date is why I stayed there once I learned of the contents of his enormous red backpack. I've never been good at playing it cool, so I always ask early on, "Do you want to have kids?" Just kidding. That was my last date. This time I say, "So what's with the huge backpack?" "Oh, it's my wing," he says. "I never hike the Chief without it." It's a thing in this town. Depending on wind conditions, people like to hike up this huge rock, jump off the top, and soar down. To do so, they carry up a sort of parachute called a wing, which, for the record, is not my thing. The temperature drops and I'm suddenly freezing. Before I proceed, and for this to make sense to the layperson not living in the sea-to-sky corridor, which extends from Whistler to Vancouver, British Columbia, I need to explain that I live in the kind of gorgeously epic small coastal mountain town that draws in a lot of folks who self-medicate with adrenaline. There are days when I could have been counted in that number. And it becomes quite clear early on that this is the case with this man who has self-identified as such, both by way of his wing and by letting me know 5 minutes in that he is 37 years old and lives in his van. This in response to his questions to me, "How old are you and do you own a house?" When I learn of the parachute in his backpack, I pursue my line of questioning a moment longer. So, do you plan to use it? "Depending on the conditions," he says. I should have bolted to my car at that point, but instead I quipped, "The conditions of the date? No, The wind conditions, he stated, looking at me like I was totally missing the plot. And for the record, this was the second man in 2 weeks' time who had really built our date around the wind conditions. But for more, you'll have to read on Parachute Boy in Awfully Hilarious Stories We Never Tell. It's been a delight to be with you here today. Happy reading, happy writing, so happy to be in your corner. And if you're ever having one of those embarrassing moments, first, remember, you're not alone. And secondly, maybe you can write about it.